The company's market value had collapsed to under $4 billion, and its own stores were being used as free showrooms for its biggest rival. Many feared Best Buy was heading down the same path as Circuit City. The diagnosis was showrooming, a condition where customers browse in-store only to buy online from a competitor. Its blue-shirted employees and sprawling retail buildings were increasingly viewed as expensive liabilities. Yet a new CEO arrived not with a plan to shrink, but to attack. He looked at the company's biggest vulnerability, its physical footprint, and saw not a weakness to be managed, but a weapon to be aimed directly at the heart of e-commerce. How do you weaponize the very thing that's killing you? The stock price had cratered to under $12, wiping out billions in market value. Confidence had evaporated. Institutional investors watched their capital decline in real time. For them, this wasn't an abstract headline, it was a massive challenge unfolding on their balance sheets. Each tick down of the stock price suggested the core operating model was in deep trouble. The market had delivered its brutal verdict. Inside corporate headquarters, a state of strategic uncertainty set in. The threat was real, and early responses struggled to stop the digital tide. Minor adjustments to displays and pricing were not enough to match the speed and scale of online competition. Every struggling initiative only highlighted the depth of the decline, showing that small fixes could not solve the underlying crisis. The company needed a fundamental change. With the challenges accelerating, the board made one final, crucial gamble, hiring a leader with zero retail experience. It was a choice that surprised the industry. But in the midst of the crisis, what was the first break-glass decision? His message was unmistakable. Best Buy could be saved by focusing on operational strengths and pushing back against the narrative that it was finished. But his real strike, his first break-glass action, was aimed at the customer's wallet. The critics' diagnosis was brutal. Best Buy was becoming a free, air-conditioned showroom for Amazon. The issue wasn't that people visited. The issue was that they left to buy elsewhere. So he made a call that sounded like surrender. He expanded on early price-matching tests into a broader policy aimed squarely at online competitors. Voluntarily matching online prices seemed like it would crush margins and lead to fiscal disaster. Some analysts expressed skepticism, believing it would only accelerate the company's decline. But they were wrong. It wasn't just a pricing tactic, it was a strategic one. The goal wasn't to be the cheapest store. It was to end showrooming by making prices competitive with online retailers, removing the excuse to leave. Joly believed that once customers were in the store, competitive prices, combined with immediate gratification and expert help, would keep them from walking out the door. It was a bold, expensive investment in trust, a strategic response to the threat of showrooming. And it worked. The freefall stopped. The loss of customers began to stabilize. But stabilizing the business is not a cure. It only buys time. And time was exactly what Hubert Joly now needed to improve Best Buy's fundamentals before moving into a growth phase. The company was stabilizing. Now Joly had to rebuild. And his first move baffled the traditional strategic playbook. He doubled down on physical retail. Instead of retreating from brick and mortar, Best Buy ran straight back into the fire, aiming to perfect the store experience. The sprawling retail locations that everyone called a liability became his greatest asset. Joly invited major brands like Samsung, Microsoft, and Apple to build premium stores within a store. The concept was simple. If brands wanted to showcase their best products, they would pay Best Buy for the real estate. Suddenly, empty space became a revenue stream. Partners invested in the very showrooms they once bypassed. Meanwhile, a quiet operational shift took place. Structural efficiencies and overhead cuts freed up vital capital without resorting to massive, brand-destroying store closures. A significant portion of these savings was reinvested directly back into the workforce. Blue-shirt employees were retrained to solve customer problems rather than just ring up sales. The Renew Blue plan set an audacious target, cutting $1 billion in costs and rebuilding the operating margin. The blueprint was drawn. But Wall Street had seen blueprints before. What it hadn't seen was execution. The theory was now fact, verified not by press releases or polished investor decks, but by the unforgiving math of the market itself. After years of brutal contraction, the first genuine signal of recovery arrived not in words, but in an earnings report. Best Buy delivered quarterly EPS of $2.61, decisively beating Wall Street's $2.48 consensus. This wasn't a statistical anomaly. It was mathematical proof that the operational pivot was generating real profit. While cost discipline and efficiencies were a key part of their transformation, the strategy also focused on competitive pricing, investments in customer experience, employee training, and supply chain improvements, with savings often reinvested into these growth initiatives. A stronger business saw shifts in vendor relationships, expert service on the floor, each gear turning the next, a flywheel of execution finally reaching critical speed. The bleeding had stopped. The patient wasn't just stabilizing, it was getting stronger. Vindication arrived in the form of capital. Leadership, operating from genuine strength, raised the quarterly dividend, the board approving a 1% increase in the regular quarterly cash dividend to 96 cents per share. Not a gesture, a declaration. The crisis is over. The model holds. We can return cash. The signal was received. New institutional money, capital that had fled in terror during the darkest quarters, began flowing back. Firms like Legato Capital initiated new positions, injecting $2.05 million into a stock. For every seller during the collapse, there was now a buyer betting on the rebound. Capital doesn't return out of sentiment. It returns out of conviction. And conviction follows results. And here's where the flywheel starts compounding. A stronger business attracted better vendor terms. Better terms funded deeper investments in service. Superior service pulled customers back from the screen and onto the floor. Each win feeding the next, each number unlocking the next number. The abstract blueprint from the previous chapter rendered now in hard, undeniable figures. The impossible had come to pass. But what can any founder, running any business, steal from a playbook that stared down extinction and won? The framework that rescued Best Buy wasn't about inventing a new product. It was something far more rare. It was psychological jujitsu. The core insight: the battle was never over price alone. It was over the customer's confidence. By meeting customers where comparison shopping had already taken them, matching competitors, prices, and elevating the in-store experience, leadership transformed Best Buy's greatest liability into its most potent asset. The key strategy wasn't an act of invention. It was an act of alignment. Competitive pricing married to a level of service no algorithm could replicate. Strip away the single biggest barrier between browsing and buying. Sometimes the best strategy is a demolition. But alignment alone doesn't pay the bills. This pivot required rewriting the rules of retail entirely. Targeted cuts to corporate overhead and operational inefficiencies improved overall financial performance. But the approach explicitly rejected the old cut playbook. Premier vendors paid to build showcase stores within the store, leveraging the company's physical footprint as an asset. And alongside that discipline, leadership poured resources into the one thing no algorithm can replicate: empowering frontline employees and investing in the in-store experience. The company doubled down on its people, training them not just to sell, but to solve complex customer problems. To be the reason someone drives to the store instead of clicking Add to Cart. That is a moat no website can copy. The path to a projected $43.1 billion in revenue wasn't paved with discounts. Trust was the multiplier. Which brings us to the deepest lesson here, one of radical accountability. The recovery began only after leadership publicly acknowledged self-inflicted problems and reframed showrooming not as a death sentence but as an opportunity, one that brought customers into stores, provided the company remained price competitive. In doing so, they earned the credibility to fight back, with price matching and a relentless focus on the in-store experience. You cannot fix what you refuse to face. This playbook isn't reserved for retail. It works anywhere the ground is shifting under your feet. The principles are universal. Diagnose the core friction. Weaponize your existing assets. And invest relentlessly in the one advantage that compounds over time: the human element. So here's the question that separates companies that survive disruption from those that don't. What is the one friction point your business model currently subsidizes for a competitor?
Learn the next winning strategy.